So like in the book, we talk about like skiing, and I'm a big skier. Like I love skiing, and especially, going like backcountry and fresh powder and that kind of stuff. But it's like when you ski, hopefully you make your S turns and you have these nice ruts in the snow. Well, if you were to ski that same exact run again and again and again, that rut would get deeper and it would get deeper and it would get deeper. And this is, an analogy to represent neurological conditioning, because the neural pathways in the brain, when we activate a neural pathway by way of emotions we feel in a certain way we think, and then we act, those neural pathways get stronger and they get reinforced. And then other neural pathways, get weaker and less strong. And so what happens, a lot of us, we activate the same neural pathways in the brain again and again and again and again. They get very, very strong. This is what forms quote unquote habit or reflex. And so if we want to redefine ourselves, we got to break apart the neural pathways that have formed, and we got to start forming literal new neural pathways in the brain.
Joey Klein, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Oh, it's awesome to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really delighted to have you because I've spent the past 2 or 3 days digging into your book, The Inner Matrix. Now, I know it's not your most recent book, which is Relationship Alchemy, which we can get to in time. But I've spent the past 2 or 3 days, I've spent a lot of time on my bike. I'm over in Spain, the sunshine, a lot of time on my bike, and I've been listening to it on Audible. And it's excellent. I'm really enjoying it. I'm getting a whole lot out of it. And I'm sure, like you, I have read in the past 40 years dozens of books on this sort of topic. And though the subtitle is Leveraging the Art and Science of Personal Mastery to Create Real Life Results, so many books on that topic. Listening to it over the past couple of days, I really feel you are getting to the core of actually what people need to do to create real life results. So for that reason, I am very keen to have a chat to you. So for people who haven't heard of Joey Klein, and for people who haven't come across the book, The Inner Matrix, maybe take us back to the beginning. Where did this all start for you? And I suppose let's start at the very basic of what the philosophy of the Inner Matrix is, and then we can pick it apart as we go. How does that sound?
Yeah, it sounds great, man. Yeah, so actually my whole journey actually started, I've been doing this now for 22 years, a little over 2 decades. And I know a lot of people, they're like very excited today to like be a coach or, get on a stage and all that kind of stuff. But I actually never had interest in doing any of that. Matter of fact, when I was in high school and I was kind of getting ready to declare my major for college, I remember a teacher asked me like, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know, but I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to ever talk in front of people. I don't ever want to write a book, and I don't want to act. Like anything else is open, right? And now it's like I'm just kind of checking the boxes of those are the things I do. And so really what motivated my journey was just a lot of pain. I grew up in a very hard environment, very dysfunctional household. And I grew up in a very small town. It's called Andover, Kansas, which is actually just outside of Wichita, Kansas. And so there wasn't a lot of like inspirational things around me. And I remember looking around at all my mentors and my family and my environment. And I was like, I'm just not going to follow this path. Like, I don't want this to be my life, but I didn't really know what to do. And so my friend and I, we moved out and just started basically just partying. I made it through a semester of college. I was on the 4.0. I was on the dean's list, but then I dropped out because I just had no passion for it. Didn't know where I wanted to go. And I remember like I pushed things a bit too far and, probably almost died. And I remember it like hit me and I was like, man, I'm here for something more. I need to figure out how to get my life together. And what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be fulfilled? And I remember that was the question that I really started obsessing about. Was like, how do you find happiness? How do you find like true fulfillment? Because I didn't see anybody in my life who was really loving the life they were living. And fast forward, I ended up meeting a mentor who kind of invited me to be what he called a live-in student in Boulder, Colorado. Very unconventional education. And he was going to teach me what he called less like, quote unquote, the healing path. And you have to remember, this is 22 years ago. Like meditation was not popular. You couldn't say meditation to people because they thought you had horns coming out of your head, right? They're like, what are you even talking about? But that was kind of where I started figuring out how to get myself together. And then that ended up leading me to, true masters in the art of what I think of as personal development, like individuals who had been in their domain, whether it was ancient wisdom traditions, such as like Taoist meditation or Buddhism or Hinduism or things like this, to world-renowned psychologists to world-renowned neurologists who had been doing what they had been doing for 50 plus years. Like those were my mentors. And so it kind of gave me the ability to figure out how to get myself in line and in order. But it significantly accelerated my developmental journey and my ability to support people.
What I'm wondering is, you talked about growing up in a rough background, or in a background where what you saw around you was not the example of how you wanted to live your life, and yet we know that you know, maybe 90% of people, whatever, never really create the lives they want to live. That's my, I mean, that I've no science behind that, but maybe you know, it's
100%,
yeah,
100%.
it's a massive amount. Most people never get to creating the lives they really want to live. A lot of that may be because they grow up in environments like you or anyone else. I mean, I grew up in Ireland in the 60s, and there was a lot of Ireland is a very prosperous country now, but it was a poor country, a relatively poor country at the time. You know, there was
Yeah.
a lot of lack. Um, I looked at that lack and said, I don't want that. I want I want something different. But most people seem to look at it and go, that's my life.
Hmm.
That's just what I accept, and that they go live that life. And I'm wondering, how do you think it was that you looked at that and saw, I need to create something different, and then went to pursue that path by studying on the masters? Why didn't you just slip under the radar? Is that just luck?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like my book, The Inner Matrix. The way I've come to discover it or understand it is everybody has their unique inner matrix, right? Which is their unique set of patterns and conditioning that drives their unconscious self, which then leads to their conscious choices, decisions, and actions. And patterns are all formed in the same way, right? Emotional impact, then mental understanding or reasoning, and then that gets ingrained or entrenched or wired in the nervous system, right? Emotion, mind, nervous
And in the
system.
book, you say that a lot of that comes from, even in the womb. It comes
Yeah.
from it. It probably comes from our parents and those people around us very, very on.
Yeah, 100%. All the science shows that conditioning and epigenetic effect and
Yeah,
things like this start literally before we're even born. Like we start being imprinted with emotional patterning. And when you think about it from like a biological sense, like it makes sense,
yeah,
right? Or an evolutionary sense, because it's like, oh, we need to be preconditioned with the information we need to
yeah.
manage our environment. So like for me, if I'm going to, be born into an environment where there's very low emotional intelligence, you know, my brothers just beat me mercilessly, right? Because they were my half brothers and they
Mm,
were like 12, 14 years older than me. And I grew up in a school where, a lot of the kids were not my ethnicity. So I got chased a lot, right? It
mm,
was called Sombra del Monte Elementary School. And so I grew up in a very kind of conflictual environment. So, what I was sort of imprinted with was different than somebody who's like, going to be growing up in an environment of like support and love and
mm,
kindness and nurturing,
mm.
right? Those are very different emotional, mental, and nervous system programming. So I think what people don't understand is that we're ingrained with these imprints that happen before we're even born. And then obviously they're reinforced as we grow through childhood and into our teenage years and then ultimately become an adult. So a lot of people, they think like, oh, I'm making conscious choices, decisions about what I
Mm.
want to do in my life. But the reality is we're actually processing information that was sort of pre-programmed, and then based on what's available to us within ourself, we make choices and decisions. So if we don't have sort of the information of options available inside, we actually can't make choices to create a different life than the one that we've known and experienced. And so like the example I often give to people is we've all known somebody who's really angry, who's quick to anger,
Oh yeah,
right? And it's like when we see people like that, their environment shows up in a certain way, and we can predetermine exactly how they're going to respond to different situations, right? They're going to shut down, they're going to isolate, they're going to lash out, they're going to yell, and it's kind of like their behavior is very predictive, right? Whereas if you look at somebody who carries a lot of compassion, right? Like a lot of my mentors carried an unreasonable amount of compassion. It's like they could be faced with the exact same set of circumstances, but a person who's compassionate is going to lead with understanding and questions and wanting to serve the other person, and how can I be of support or selflessness or service, or how can I contribute. And it's sort of like the energy of ourself that we bring to the space is going to be completely different depending on if we feel angry or we feel compassionate, right? But I think what a lot of people don't understand is they're not in touch with those sort of unconscious patterns that are driving a special emotional sensitivity. And so it's like if what I have access to is quick to anger, that's all I have access to is those options. But if I can take a pause and learn how to train compassion as an example, right, we can then go, okay, do I want to turn on anger? Do I want to turn on compassion to manage the situation? And each of those expressions is going to bring about a completely different set of options for us to manage current circumstance and the future that we could or may not build, depending on what our options are.
I mean, I know many people who reach to anger. It's not uncommon. I imagine most of the people who automatically reach to anger do not reflect that it's based on their epigenetics or what's been programmed. They blame you. You know, I turned up today, I asked Joey this, and he responded this way, and I got mad at him. And when I go back and tell my friends about this, I explain it's because Joey Klein. It was his fault. They're gonna. So
Uh-huh.
I mean, whereas when you talk about the masters who were calm and compassionate, I'm guessing they're individuals who maybe also at some stage had anger, but began to reflect inwards and began to do the reprogramming, which I guess is kind of fundamentally what the inner matrix is about. Which is what I'm getting to is we have to recognize those patterns and maybe take responsibility. And maybe most people don't recognize them, and if they do recognize them, they're not willing to accept responsibility.
Yeah, I would say first step is developing and training. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is inner mechanics or inner abilities or talents are skills that we develop. It's not something that's there or not there. Just like going to the gym. Like if I want to understand how to work out or run well, like there is a style to running, right? There is a
Mm.
form to run correctly, right? I did a 3 mile trail run this morning, and it's like I was managing my heart rate and staying in zone two, and I was making sure my cadence was at 90 paces a minute, and making sure I was landing softly and making sure my chest was upright. And it's like there's all these sort of mechanics to running well, right?
Yeah.
It's a skill set. And what I think is a lot of people understand is like inner dynamics, emotional management, mental management, nervous system management. Those are internal mechanics, and we can learn to manage them really, really well, ultimately master them
Mm.
and ourselves if we're willing to put in the time. So like first step is let's train awareness and sensitivity, which is like, hey, I know where I'm at. And I know that sounds often, sort of basic, but truly, like we were talking about earlier, you said, 90% of people will never create the life they truly aspire to. The way I look at it is like 90 to 95% of people, if you ask them, hey, how are you feeling? Where are you at? They would be feeling, say, anger, or they might be feeling depressed, or they might be feeling sad or unworthy or anxious, but they wouldn't be able to tell you that's what they're feeling because they actually don't have sensitivity of it. They actually don't know that's where they are. They haven't developed or trained the capacity of awareness and sensitivity to the inner dynamics that are actually going on with them. And so then it basically becomes what I call a ghost in the machine.
Mm.
It's still there,
It's
it's an
driving you.
intelligence still driving us. We just have no idea that it's directing. So, like, first step is really awareness, sensitivity. Hey, in this moment, I feel angry. In this moment, I feel joy. In this moment,
Mm.
I feel X. But then full ownership of what we feel, and it's about relationship. I think a lot of people, like traditional therapies, have really done people a disservice because they train people that the emotions that we feel come from the past. Right. If you go to them with some challenge, I feel depressed or I feel anxious or I feel angry, they're going to go, great, tell me what's happening. And you're going to tell them about some situation in the past, and they're going to guide you to maybe your childhood or your teenage years and the dynamics that were going on there. And then, as an explanation of this is why you're angry. Whereas neurologically speaking, that's actually false. It actually isn't how our brain functions. And so, a more accurate way to say it is in the past, there were individuals around you in an environment that taught you the pattern or the conditioning of to be angry or anxious, etc. And so today you're now operating in a reflex or like a bad habit.
Mm.
It'd be like if everybody picked their nose around you when you were young, you just pick your nose, you wouldn't even think about that as being odd, and then you grow up and that's just what you do, right?
Mm.
Whereas like for most people, because they don't want their kids embarrassed if they see their kid picking their nose or pulling their hand out, they're pulling that hand out of the nose, and they're like, don't pick your nose, that's no good.
Mm.
And they teach them right away not to do that. But we don't do that with emotions because we don't know to do that.
Mm.
And so a more accurate representation or relationship is, hey, in this moment I'm feeling X, The only reason I feel that is because of the patterns that are going on
Mm.
inside me. It's not because of my current circumstance. It's not because this person did this thing. It's not because I lost my job. It's not because the environment's doing this. It's not because this is what's happening in politics. It's like, first, we got to really create that separation, distinction of, hey, in this moment, awareness, sensitivity, this is where I am. And I'm here because of reflexes, conditioning, and training. I'm not here because of the circumstances that are occurring. And this is such an important distinction because that distinction will lead us to true ownership, which is in this moment, I feel this way. I'm experiencing this. I'm perceiving reality this way. That has to do with my emotional conditioning and my mind, nothing else.
I, as I was listening to your bike, to your bike, I was on my bike. I was listening to your book only this morning, and I'm sure it's, yeah, it's 10 years ago. How long ago since you wrote the Inner Matrix? Probably a long time ago.
I mean, I wrote the first version. It was probably 12 years ago. And then I did a complete rewrite probably 6 years ago
So I
or so.
probably remember more of it than you do at this stage. So, but you said something that I was surprised by. It's very simple. You would advise people to stop periodically throughout the day, maybe 3 or 4 times a day,
Mhm.
and check in with their emotions or what they were feeling. Now I was surprised by it because I thought, well, I mean, that's very, very basic. I mean, surely, I mean, I never need to check on how I'm feeling because I'm always aware of how I'm feeling. And whatever it is I'm feeling, I know to bring my attention to the feeling of it, not to how my mind is reacting to it, but I bring my body to the physical
Yeah.
sensation of that. So I'm always aware of that. I would find it very difficult to be unaware of that. Um, but obviously, from your experience, that's something you need to guide people back. Hey, let's start with tuning into what you're actually feeling and begin to get an understanding of that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because like even though we think we're always connected to ourselves, there's always subtle layers that we will notice
Yeah.
when we pay attention differently. So like even myself, I've been doing this now like every day. There's not I can't even remember the last time a day went by where I didn't put in at least 20 minutes in the
Mm,
morning and 20 minutes in the evening of direct inner training or like, inner development or meditation or mindfulness or whatever we want to call it, right? And still today, like as I check in throughout the day, like right before I got on this
mm,
podcast with you, I was like, okay, let's take a moment.
mm,
In this moment, how am I feeling? And the reason I'm asking that question is it's a performance question, not so much a well-being question at
mm,
this point. And so what I mean by that is like, I literally came in hot, right? I got done with my run, I took a shower, ate some breakfast, and then, boom, I
mm,
sat down and I was like, okay, where am I at? And I wasn't anxious, but I was definitely a little like hyper, I would
mm.
call it. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to be the best space to nail the podcast.
Yeah.
So I took, 20 seconds and just, did a little breathing, calm my nervous
Mm,
system down just because I was going from one thing to the next this morning. And I was able to get to a place where, I felt relatively calm and peaceful. And then I thought about the people that are hopefully served or
mm,
impacted or, are benefiting from this time that we're sharing together. And that kind of brought me to a place of like inspiration a little bit. And so if I would have got on here from that place of, sort of like post workout high, right?
mm.
More excitement than anything, it wouldn't have been bad, but it would have been very different than if I just took the moment to align and make sure I was in a different emotional state.
Well, I think what you're aware of there is you bring a very different energy to the conversation. Then, now I will do something similar before a podcast. I will make sure that I never want to be rushed to it. So I always want to be in my desk probably 30 to 40 minutes before I'm going to talk to a guest. I want to be at my desk, make sure everything is set up. And then when everything is set up, I will take a few moments of meditation just to be calm. Because if I'm present, then I'm more present with the guest. And then it's going to be a better conversation because I'm actually paying attention to what
Mhm.
you're saying. And I think if for me, if I don't tune into what might be going on in me, then it becomes a distraction, even if I'm unaware of it, and it's tugging at me. And I've only got this hour or whatever with Joey Klein, but I'm being tugged about a conversation or something I had earlier. So yeah, for me, it's fundamentally important. One of the things I know you've a background in meditation and mindfulness, as have I, going back about 4 decades. Um, and when people talk about mindfulness and quieting the mind, I often reflect that they may be a step too far ahead and they may need to pull back to what's going on in their emotional body or their feelings because if you, I believe that my experience is that the busy mind is often busy as a result of unaddressed emotional body, if you want something else. And so we're trying to quiet this mind, and really what we should be, what I believe we should be doing is paying attention to what's going on in the body, because when we settle that, the mind tends to settle also. Does that make sense to you in your mindfulness experience?
I think it's what I have found is it's a step in the process, right? So like for me, I think people get a little discouraged because they go, "Oh, I'm supposed to do this like meditation and a training thing and quiet my mind, and then something great's supposed to happen, or all is going to be well." And in my mind, it's like, yes, we want to learn the skills and tactics of like centering the mind or stopping the train, as I say, but then we want to learn to use that space to then condition or program our inner patterns, right? Our inner matrix, emotion, thought strategies, nervous system to work on our behalf. Because the mind is going to think, it's going to be active. And we want it to do so. We want it to be, active, right? Like it would not be a good situation to be like a vegetable, right? Where all of a sudden your mind isn't there anymore, right? Or like, cognitive decline, like Alzheimer's, something like that. So we want the mind to think, we want it to be busy, we want it to be active, but we need to train it on how to be active. And so for me, it's like inner training is about being aware of what's there, learning to center or still what's going on, but then condition and train the mind, the emotions, and the nervous system to operate in the most effective way relative to who we want to become and what we want to create in our life, so that our mind and our emotions and our nervous system become our greatest ally, as opposed to a lot of people, they really have become their greatest kind of enemy. The mind is against them. The mind is working against what they're looking for, what their aspirations are. And so it's like, I think if we take the approach and understand the mind is always going to think, so let's teach it how to think really well. Let's teach it how to think on our behalf, so that then when we learn to check in on the mind, it's like we just see it doing all this amazing stuff on our behalf, as opposed to looking at the mind and it's just going through the random to-do list, or the criticisms of ourself and other people, or the fears of what the future might bring, or we're constantly stuck in the loops of the past and thinking about terrible things that have happened to us, and what it means, and things like that. And it's like all that junk is what gets in the way of who we could become and what we could create. And when we learn to train the mind to truly be our greatest ally in terms of what we want to create, and we train it to operate on our behalf and in partnership with us, all of a sudden it becomes the greatest tool you've ever had.
And where's the starting point for that? I mean, what's the base layer? Someone sits in front of you. What's step one of that? Is that step one in the mindfulness practice, in the centering and the calming of the body and the mind, or where do you start with that? Someone.
Yeah. So I think like there's three ways. Like if we want to look at how do we develop ourselves as efficiently as fast as possible, it's great to bring kind of three components together. One is intensity, like immersion. When I look at why I was able to create what I was able to create, obviously we don't need to go to this extreme, but like I would go to India in Varanasi and I'd be meditating 8 hours a day, working with my meditation master for months at a time. Like every day, like wake up 6 a.m., meditation start, you go till 9, go to sleep, wake up, do it again. And that was pretty crazy. And I was at a time in my life I could do that. But it's like create an environment of intensity, like whether it's like a weekend training, or you're going to take a half day for yourself, and you really want to like go into yourself and understand what are you doing. Then you want to combine that with consistency of execution. And so we got to understand, like, if we're going to really get a great handle on ourselves, we can't be looking at it as like a 30-day event, right? Like 30 days to weight loss and you're great. Or, I'm going to do this thing for 5 minutes a day, and in a week I'm going to be awesome. It's like we want to take it on like physical exercise or nutrition and go, I'm going to commit to a little bit of consistency here, right? We don't have to do a lot. We got to be willing to do 10 or 20 minutes every day to develop high capacity within ourselves, high functionality. And then the third piece is consistency throughout the day. And so for me, it's like in the morning, if we want to develop an ability to see ourselves, it's as simple as eliminate distraction initially and spend some time with ourselves, but in an intentional way. So like one of the very first things I train people to do in our programs is like sit down, eliminate all distraction. Don't do any therapy techniques. Don't do any breathing. Don't do anything. Like literally take 10 minutes a day and just sit with yourself and just check in every few minutes. What's occurring for me? How do I feel? What's the mind thinking? And just take note of it. And there's going to be all this stuff there. And a lot of people don't like to do this because when we sit down initially, 10 minutes, 20 minutes just by ourselves with ourselves, it's like people are inherently uncomfortable because they start to become aware and sensitive to all the stuff that's usually there that actually creates or causes quite a bit of discomfort. And then the key is start building relationship with that. So as we notice things coming up, truly just acknowledging it and going, hey, this is conditioning from my past.
Mm.
It's not relative to what's present. It's so important to just say this like a mantra and really go, man, what I'm getting in touch with right now is the conditioning from the past. It's not about what's going on in my present. And the reason very few people create the life they could create is because they keep operating from the programs from their past in an attempt to create their future, and that doesn't work that way. We've got to learn to step out of the programs from the past and truly adopt new ideas, new information, new philosophy, new emotions, new feelings, new ways of being if we're going to create something different in the future. And that's just like basic sense, but then the application of it can be pretty intricate. And I think literally just spending time with ourselves, but not just spending time with ourselves, acknowledging what we're becoming aware and sensitive to, and then truly making that acknowledgement. All of these emotions I feel, all these thoughts I'm experiencing, all these sensations, my nervous system are conditions from my past. Then starting to learn nervous system management would be your next step, which is, breathing gently, whether you do four-sided breath or box breathing, and learning to center the nervous system so that we're creating a cognitive change, right? We're going from sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and learning to calm that down and activating parasympathetic nervous system, because from there we can become suggestive. And when we become suggestive, we can start truly conditioning or retraining our pattern dynamics or our inner matrix to align with the future we want to create.
I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense. I suppose if our lives are being directed by these thought processes and these patterns that are in our body and our mind, um, and for most of us or most of our lives, that's unconscious because
Mhm.
it's based on what we've taken from our parents or from our environment. So we've taken these patterns that we're unconscious of, and we're now trying to, and that we're now living a future and wondering why it's not changing. Well, it's because we're literally, we're running with the same engine, and why isn't it going faster?
Right.
It sounds like what you're suggesting is first we got to become aware that we're running these old patterns, acknowledge that they're literally just patterns, they're programs that have been put in there, and now give ourselves the space to recognize those patterns and start intentionally inserting new patterns that are aligned with the future we want to create. Is that an accurate summary of what you're proposing?
Yeah, I think so. Right. It's like the thing that I see people often do is like instead of investing in the emotions in the mind, right? There's a statistic and it says, and depending on which study you look at, basically it comes out and it's like, hey, the average person has around 60,000 thoughts that flow through the mind in any given day. And of those thoughts, we're only aware of less than 3% of them, which means the other 97% of thoughts are occurring, influencing us, but we don't even know they're happening. And then if we understand how the nervous system functions, behind those thoughts are emotions. Like what dictates what we're going to think is actually the emotions that we feel. A lot of people, they go, man, you need to think differently and then you'll feel different. In my opinion, we should do it the opposite. We need to learn to access emotions directly, shift the nervous system and those emotions we're feeling. That then gives us the ability to not only change the way we're thinking, but get the unconscious self to reprogram what we're thinking. And so it's like, man, if we can become aware of the emotions we're feeling, and instead of looking for a reason as to why we feel that way, which is the biggest mistake I see
Okay.
people make, is they go, oh my gosh, I feel sad. Well,
This
why
is
do I feel
why.
sad?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, like the byproduct of sadness, like all emotions have rules. So if I feel sad, my mind is going to focus on the absence of something. Like anytime a human being feels sad, they're always going to focus on the absence of something, and that's something that's been trained and taught, and they've been conditioned to do that without realizing it. But when we look at it or we analyze it, we go, man, I feel sad because I'm having a tough time at my job, or I don't like what I do, or my partner's upset with me, or I had this event happen in my past. I'm still sad about it 10 years later today. And so it's like we need to stop that and go, oh, in this moment I feel sad, and that's okay. I feel sad because that's the conditioning from my past. Another way to say that is like the emotions we feel today are not present and a byproduct of today. They're a representation of our past. So all emotions we feel today were actually conditioned and created in the past. And so it'd be more accurate to say life is happening today, And then my nervous system is deciding which emotion to react to today's circumstances based on learning from the past. So what we want to do is we want to get future focused. We want to understand, how do we create the emotions of the person we want to become and that align with the future we want to create. And so now when we look at our emotions or the thoughts we're having, a different question makes sense, which is, does this emotion inherently align me with the future that I want to create? In a very practical way.
Mm.
Does this align me with the wealth I want to build? Does this align me with the level of connection and vibrancy that I want to have in my romantic relationship? Is this going to drive me to the health and vitality that I want to be inside of with myself? If it does, we nurture it, we reinforce it. If it doesn't, we need to learn to redirect that emotion, that mind, and activate a different feeling. So like for me, when I first started driving, I was a really angry person because that's what I learned from my environment. Matter of fact, if you said the wrong thing to me, I might punch you in the face. Like it was not great, right? Very, very violent, very unhinged. And what I realized is like, man, I had a certain option in terms of how to react to my environment based on core conditioning. And if I would have continued with my core conditioning, and I came very close, but like I never ended up in jail, but like I would have either been in prison or dead. Like that's not an exaggeration.
Mm.
And when I was taught how to find peace, like how do I center myself, step out of anger and find peace? And then eventually I was taught, hey, here's how you access gratitude and here's how you condition and train compassion. And so being able to access this like gratitude or this compassion, it didn't just save my life, it gave me access to a completely different set of options. I could still get angry and I could still go down that road, but all of a sudden there was all this other options available to me. And when I looked at the future I wanted to build, the kind of life I wanted to live, the kind of friends I wanted to have, the relationships I wanted to have, the wealth I wanted to build, it's like, oh, this gratitude or this peace or this compassion or inspiration is going to be a much more productive energy for creating these future realities. And so before I had any of those things like logically or practically, I created the idea of the future in my mind. And then I started constructing myself as the person that would align with it in the future. And it started with feeling new emotions.
Mm.
Then it was starting to construct new ways of thinking or seeing reality. And then all of a sudden I had these options. It was like, oh, I could still go into this
Mm.
past self, emotions from the past, or I could start stepping into the emotions of the future that I'm designing today that'll give me an option of a different life moving forward. And obviously I'm like oversimplifying this, right? But it's not hard to train if we learn how or we're willing to put in the time. But it's like it really is getting aligned with the emotions of our future self and the thinking and the thought forms and the beliefs and the value system of that future version of ourself. And then that future reality will emerge through us as a byproduct of that change.
I suppose there are times when anger, sadness, frustration, whatever emotion arises, there are times when those emotions arise and they are appropriate to the situation. I mean, something happens and I react. I feel anger rising in me,
Mhm.
and it's a natural human reaction to the situation I find myself in that anger arises. Uh, so I suppose that is a natural reaction, and this, I suppose, what I mentioned, that seems to me to be a reaction in the present moment. Uh, I suppose then, what do you let go of that, or let that just pass, or what do you end up punching someone in the face? Is that where the historical part of it comes? Because you could leave your desk now, and something could happen, and you could feel anger rising. I
Mhm.
suppose now it's that you have a choice, and you go, well, if I respond by punching this person in the face, what sort of future is that creating for me? Or if I let that, I mean, do you just
Mhm.
then let that anger dissipate and choose, okay, now I need to focus on different emotions because I know where anger leads me?
Yeah, I think two things. One, yes, anger's natural. Like if we're a human being, we're going to feel angry at
Yeah.
times. We're going to feel agitated.
Yeah,
Like
because I don't
still,
want people listen to this thinking, "Oh, my emotions are wrong. I shouldn't feel angry. I should
yeah, yeah,
feel
yeah,
sad."
exactly. So
Because
it's like
that's not
first step
helpful
is
either, I
like
don't
like
think.
every emotion is okay.
Yeah,
Like every emotion is
and
natural.
will
Hatred's
naturally
natural.
occur.
Yeah. Hatred's natural, anger's natural, anxiety's natural,
Mm.
depression's natural, sadness is natural, grief is natural. All these emotions as like a feeling are
But
natural,
getting
and
stuck there is not.
they're all useful in different
Yes.
ways, right? So the feeling of emotion is important, because if we don't feel it, we're not aware of it. Again, it's gonna drive us
Yeah.
unconsciously, right? But I think the distinction that we want to start making is the reactions are not natural, right? So
How
like
you
for
respond
me,
to it is not natural.
yeah, exactly. The way we respond to our environment and circumstance, that there's nothing about that that's natural.
Okay.
That's trained and conditioned,
Yeah.
right? And what activates one emotion over another is not natural. That's also trained and conditioned. So, like as an example, somebody could, insult me. They could
Mm,
call me stupid. Joey, you're an idiot,
mm,
right? In the past, based on what I learned from my environment, I would get angry and I would retaliate, right? But, my mentors, as an example, that I had in my life, had training. And so somebody could call them the exact same thing, and they literally would not react initially with anger. They would react or respond with compassion, understanding that this person is in pain,
mm,
or that they're ignorant, or it's just not worth, losing their state for, or suffering over this individual's ignorance or whatever. And so reactions to life, responses are not natural, they're trained and conditioned.
mm.
Now, it might seem like it's natural because we're so fast to the
Yeah.
reactions that we show up with in our life that gets, as I say, gets activated in us. But when we learn to train this
Mm,
stuff and you start redefining, reconditioning, retraining your impulsive reaction and or response to things, you start realizing nothing is actually natural. It's all trained and conditioned. So why don't I take reign over my
mm.
training and conditioning and design the emotions and the thoughts that I want to predetermine, because they're going to align me with not just the experience of life I want to have, but the success, whatever that means to us, I aspire to have.
Yeah, I suppose it's about looking at the life you want to create for yourself. And I believe that most of these 95% of people never do that. Two things: they probably never actually give themselves permission to go, well, what actually is the life I want? And even if they did, they probably don't think it's possible. Uh,
Right.
so maybe they have to start to that point of believing. But once you've looked at the life you want to create and you believe that's possible, I suppose then you can look back at how you're behaving, what you're feeling, and how you're responding, and go, well, is this serving that? If I remain an angry man who punches people, what's
Yeah.
the odds of me ending up being a best-selling self-help author? Probably, you know, or will I be behind bars? Is but I mean, you do get to go. Okay, well, I can continue to do this, but it's not going to be alignment. And if I reprogrammed myself with these different ways to response, but something you said earlier, which I think struck me, was that um, it is a bit like going to the gym. You're not going to teach this to someone. Well, so you can correct me. My assumption is you're not going to teach this to someone. They're going to walk out of your room or your seminar and go, I'm fixed. What you're going to do is give someone a set of tools, just like you were training them in martial art, and go, this is how
Mhm.
you do it. Are you willing to train with me for the next decade as you slowly,
Yeah.
become better and stronger and fitter? Because I mean, that's my experience, and I imagine that's your experience with most people. If they're not willing to take that commitment and do that work on themselves, that's what's needed, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's interesting because like we can experience a shift in ourselves almost
Yes,
immediately.
yeah.
Like when I was, I was 21, 22 years old when I first started training people, because my mentors were like, you have to go teach what we're teaching you, otherwise we're not going to train you. And I was like, I don't want to teach. Like, why would I
I'm a
want to do
kid.
that? And they're
Yeah.
like, well, if you want us to train you, you're going to do that, right? It wasn't an option. So I started doing that, and eventually a mentor of mine was like, you need to kind of make a living out of this stuff. Like, you can need to stop sleeping on people's couches and hanging out in your car, right? You need to like make something of
Mm,
yourself. So pick a rate. People are already asking you for advice. Let's start charging people. And I remember I go, okay. But my first clients, because my mentor Lou in Los Angeles was a world-renowned psychologist, and I was teaching her inner training, meditation, and she was training me in psychology. We were trading, and she started referring me to her clients. But her clients were like, some of the like famous actors and actresses, and of the time, and like very successful entrepreneurs, executives at like Sony Industries, and,
mm,
and the Fortune 100, 500 companies, like pro athletes. So all of a sudden I'm working with the elite of society, who are operating at the top level, what they're doing. but I was there because they were not happy. They were not fulfilled. They had all the things. They had all the money. They had all the success. They had fame. Like if I named their names, like you'd know who they are,
Yeah.
kind of
But
fame,
not the
right?
fulfillment.
And they were totally suffering, right? And they'd try psychology, all the things. So Lou would just send me over there, and then they wouldn't know who I am, and because it was just a referral from Lou, and I'd show up at their house, and they open the door, and there's this like 20 some odd year old kid just standing there, right? And they're like, "You cannot be the person Lou sent over here," right? And so like I basically had 20 minutes, and that's what I would say to him. I go, "I get it. I'm young. Give me 20 minutes. If you don't feel like this is worth your time, I'm out of here." And so in as little as 20 minutes, if we understand what to do, we can create a significant shift in the experience of ourselves.
Mm.
The mistake people make is they go, "Oh, I experienced a shift in the experience of myself. This means I'm now good." No, it's an opportunity now. It's something that's become available, but now we need a condition as our reflex, and we need that to take over the thing that used to be happening. That's where training comes in, right? And what I find is like in as little as 2 days, like when we do our immersive trainings or like our weekend programs, we go from 10 in the morning till 10 at night, 10 in the morning till 5 p.m. And we go without a break. Like
Mm.
we're constantly training. It's not really lecture style. It's all
Yeah.
experiential.
Yeah.
And like in 2 days of immersion, you can create a transformation. Like you can truly create a new paradigm or experience of yourself where you're accessing something completely different than you've known before. But then again, the mistake people make is they go, "Oh, I feel great. Now we go back to our life." But then we go back to doing the same things we've always
Mm.
done. And now all of a sudden we lose that transformative moment as opposed to reinforcing it with that consistency of training so we hold on to it. And so transformation can happen very quickly. Transformation can happen instantaneously. Mastery takes time. The redefining of oneself takes time.
I've had done much training over the years with Tony Robbins, so I really understand this notion of immersion because he does exactly what you do, which is bring you in, and
Yeah.
you're still standing in a room at 11 p.m. at night, and you're going, "What the hell is going on with this guy?" And then you realize that what's going on is he has you for a weekend, and he wants to completely
Yeah,
immerse you in this. And I
exactly.
remember doing his Unleash the Power Within, and then deciding to sign up for his whole mastery program. But I think and I knew many people who'd gone to that weekend, but it was essential because then it was like I was doing one training and then in 3 months' time I was going to the next and three. So I was being dragged along in this immersion process because otherwise I would have slipped off the track. And I love your analogy of the ski slope. If you remember
Mhm.
that, you might just
Yeah,
explain it
yeah,
because I think that
100%.
it describes clearly to people how our behavior reinforced itself. You might just, if you can recall that analogy, I think it would stick with people.
Yeah, 100%. So like in the book we talk about like skiing, and I'm a big skier. Like I love skiing, and especially, going like backcountry
Mm.
and fresh powder and that kind of stuff. But it's like when you ski, hopefully you make your S turns and you have these nice ruts in the snow. Well, if you were to ski that same exact run again and again and again, that rut would get deeper and it would get deeper and it would get deeper. And this is, an analogy to represent neurological conditioning, because the neural pathways in the brain, when we activate a neural pathway by way of emotions we feel in a certain way we think and then we act, those neural pathways get stronger and they get reinforced, and then other neural pathways get weaker and less strong. And so what happens is a lot of us, we activate the same neural pathways in the brain again and again and again and again. They get very, very strong. This is what forms quote unquote habit or reflex. And so if we want to redefine ourselves, we got to break apart the neural pathways that have formed, and we got to start forming literal new neural pathways in the brain. And that's like when we immerse ourselves in deep training, like a weekend program that I was speaking about, and then we reinforce it daily, right? Just 10 minutes a day. It doesn't need to be like a whole life event. It's just 10 or 20 minutes a day. If we're doing the correct training and we're in the right discipline, it will break apart current neural pathways or that rut, that skier's rut, and it'll form new neural pathways, new lines in which we can execute from. And the idea is if we reinforce the new neural pathways enough, eventually the old neural pathways are going to lose formation. They're going to dissolve. They're going to go away. And the new constructs are what we're left with, which is what gives us the ability to feel joy. Like joy is a neural pathway.
Mm.
Sadness is a different neural pathway. So if we can learn to recognize when that neural pathway of sadness is active, turn that neural pathway off, activate the neural pathway that activates or creates joy in the body and sends a whole different hormonal reaction to the physiology and the organs, etc. That's how we literally can train new emotions, which then give us access to new decisions and actions.
And I suppose the point there, if your normal reaction is anger, frustration, irritability, if that's your normal response, that's your pathway furrowed in in the ski slope. I mean, that's the pathway
Right.
you're in, and so your brain almost has no choice but to drop into that neural pathway, and it may be unpleasant, but it's comfortable. It's what they know, and now you decide, I don't want to be angry anymore. I want to feel joy, and this is where, well, you consciously have to recognize that I need to start creating neural pathways, and it will feel bloody difficult, bloody uncomfortable, and will be hard, and I will slip very easily back into the anger until I continually retrain it over a period of time. And eventually you reverse those neural pathways, and now joy or peace or happiness becomes easier for you than anger.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. And then I loved what you said there in terms of like the thing is like comfort is
Yeah.
what we tie familiar to. So even though like it might be really really painful, if it's something we're accustomed to and we're actually comfortable with it, right? Comfort is familiarity. Discomfort is unfamiliar. So if I'm not often joyful and all of a sudden I feel joyful or peaceful or all the things we say we want to experience, we actually feel very uncomfortable initially in those different expressions because they're unfamiliar. And
Yeah.
then we've got to learn to overcome that discomfort, which is where practice and discipline comes in, so that it becomes natural. And we use that word natural. All the only thing natural really is that which we're comfortable with. It's become a reflex. It's like I always tell people, like that no sports. I was a baseball player, and I got pretty good, and I got pretty good as a hitter, right? And I remember I wanted to learn golf as an adult, and it was very hard to hit that ball straight because I swung it like a baseball bat, right?
Yeah.
And like when I swung it correctly and the ball went straight, it was the most awkward feeling in my body I'd ever experienced because I was doing all these things that for years I was taught exactly not to do, right?
Yeah.
Because a golf swing is completely different than a baseball swing. And what I had to do is go, oh, look for that awkward sensation because that's correct.
Yes. Yeah.
And then once I kind of mimicked that awkward sensation, knowing that was correct, eventually that awkward sensation, I did it so many times, is no longer awkward. It now felt quote unquote natural. Right. So it's the same thing with training emotions. We've got to learn how to manage the nervous system until the new way of being becomes natural because we've passed that awkwardness and it's just become a reflex.
And we've got to recognize that it will feel uncomfortable, it will feel unnatural. And I'm conscious of someone listening to this, or watching this and thinking, okay, I do get too angry, or whatever it is, and I want to change that. And then they go and change, and they go, oh, that was really difficult. I found it, to try and find calm or
Mhm.
whatever in that situation. And I suppose the lesson here is, yes, that's right. It will feel difficult, and that's a signal to you, that because if it felt even if it felt unpleasant, if it felt comfortable, you're staying in the same neural pathway. If you're noticing that it's hard to move to this, then you're doing, even if you feel you're making no progress, you're probably making a lot of progress just by the fact you notice, yes, it's difficult for me to be calm. Excellent. Keep doing that and it will become easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Exactly.
recall I was in an entrepreneurs retreat there a couple of months ago, and we're in a room in the evening, sharing different things. And I can't remember, the question came up, and we were giving everyone had to sit in front of the group, and we're giving this some feedback. And I got this feedback from a lot of people. If people said that I radiated calm, and I'm thinking to myself, well, sure, I've been practicing meditation every day for 40 years. And the reason I just say that is because it's not that, oh my God, you're a calm individual. No, I've
Right.
trained myself to be calm, because when I was a teenager, I wasn't. And so
Right.
it's I mean, it's the training, and then people assume, no, that's your natural state. Well, it is now,
Right.
like it is now. I'm conscious of our time moving on. I really, if you still have time, I'd really like to talk a little bit about your new book, Relationship Alchemy, which, as I say, I've dug into Inner Matrix, and I haven't to Relationship Alchemy, but I'm interested in it because ultimately, if we don't create great relationships in our life, nothing else much matter. Um, could you talk a little bit about the essence of Relationship Alchemy, and what's that all about?
For sure. So it's interesting because, like, we've been talking about about the inner matrix and our inner pattern dynamics. And something that I realize is if we want to know a fulfilled life and create what is truly possible for ourselves and in every regard, right? Inner well-being, financial success, wealth, friendships, vibrant families, etc. It all does start with us within ourselves. Like we have to commit to learning to train our emotion, our thought strategies in our nervous system, and align the realities of ourselves with that which we want to create. Like that's always going to be our first step is truly training ourselves. It starts with us, inner training. But then from there, we do need tools and tactics if we're going to thrive in any regard, right? If we want to build wealth, we need to understand the system to follow. We need to have the financial competencies of investing and so on and so forth if we're going to thrive financially. And it's the inner management that gives us the ability to execute the tactics and the systems. If you had access to the tactics and the systems, because when I first started training people, I thought, man, if I just give them the tactics and the systems, the answers, they're going to transform their life. It's going to be great. But then I gave them the answers. Nobody did anything. And I was like, well, what's going on here? It's because they couldn't actually get themselves to take new action because the emotions and the thought strategies and the nervous system was getting in their way. And so what relationship alchemy is over the last 22 years, one of the passions that I've had because my family struggled. And I was like, how do you make families work? Like, what does that look like? How do you make relationships work? Because mine clearly didn't at a time. What I found was like, oh, when we look at 1,000 different relationships, which for me, I still work in the trenches today, even though I don't have to. I still have a one-on-one practice. I still like working with people directly, even though I now have, I think 90,000 people or something have been through
Wow.
our programs and trainings at
That's
this
a lot
point,
of
right?
people.
But I still love having a one-on-one practice because I love training people, right? And it's interesting because like after taking literally over 1,000 couples through a process, and usually they come to me and they're like, Joey, we're going to divorce, or it's like business partners who are about to sue each other for, who's going to get what when they sell the company or whatever it is. It's like, oh, when relationships don't work, we're doing the same key things. There are certain habits, there are certain patterns, there are certain dynamics that diminish relationship. And then on the other side, when you look at relationships that really thrive, there are certain key things that those individuals are doing that are ensuring relationships thrive. And so what relationship alchemy is really like, hey, here's what is going to destroy a relationship, and here's why we do it, and here's how we stop doing it. And then here's what we do instead. Like these things are going to make sure not just your romantic relationship thrives, but all relationships thrive, right? Because the core way of being in relationship is the same in all relationships. Like the way we are with our spouse truly is very similar to, and the same as, for the most part, the way we are with our friends and our boss and our coworkers and so forth. Like 90% of relation dynamics are the same in all relationships. And so if we look at one relationship that we want to see ourselves enhance or transform, and we go, okay, here are the relationship dynamics that I'm going to get inside of to ensure that this relationship thrives, then we're going to align ourselves with all relationships thriving. So that's essentially what relationship alchemy is.
And what are some of those basics that we need to get right in relationships?
Yeah. So the two right off the bat that the biggest mistake people make is they have the other, like we were just talking about emotions earlier, they make the other person responsible for how they feel.
Okay.
If we do that in a relationship, it's going to not work out well, right? Because at the end of the day, we're the only one who can truly feel the way we want to feel, and we are responsible for our feelings. So that's step one is if we have the other person be responsible for how we feel, relationship's going to struggle. If we take ownership of our emotions and we make ourselves responsible for how we feel, and we start paying attention to the energy and the emotion we bring to the relationship, that's the first key to making sure they thrive, is like
That sounds
focus
like a
on the
mountain
emotion
to
and
get
energy
over.
I'm going to bring to it, as opposed to blaming the other person because I don't feel good.
I'm going to say that sounds like a mountain to get over for a lot of relationships that are in difficulty.
It can be a mountain, but truly, if we understand
Yeah, if I'm blaming
how
you,
and the
where can the
tactics,
conversation go? Yeah.
yeah, we're done, right? And it's complicated if we don't know how, like anything, right? It's like, for me, I always tell people, give me a weekend, right? And 20 minutes of your day for 3 months,
Yeah.
and we will completely transform your experience of yourself. Like, it doesn't take a lot,
But it
but we
takes
need to know what
something.
to
Yeah.
do. We need to do it
Yeah.
correctly. It does take something,
So,
right?
so
Same
that's
thing
the
with
first step, that
relationship.
we take responsibility. What was the
Yeah,
second
biggest is
important
right
thing?
there. Emotional
Yeah,
responsibility,
emotional responsibility for
right?
how I feel.
And then,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then the second thing is start managing attention. Because most people, when they engage relationship, they very quickly are focusing on the irritants of the relationship, what's not going well, why it's not going well, and they focus a lot on the past, right? What you did to me, what didn't work, etc. And so, what we want to do is we want to start altering that. We want to create a vision for the relationships in our life. Very few people, if you were like, "What do you want your marriage to be in 5 years?" they would not have a clear and concise answer for you, right? Or even more important, most of us want long-term, marriages or friendships. It's just like, "Hey, what do you want your marriage to be in 20 years?" Like most people don't have a vision or an idea of what they want their relationship to aspire
Mm.
to.
Yeah.
And in the absence of that vision and what they want the relationship to aspire to, we're going to focus on current circumstances. The brain is going to default to the things that are painful or challenging, and then we're going to end up back in the past. And so the key is, instead of being current circumstance and past focus in relationship, let's start working toward the vision for relationship that we aspire to. So number one, let's name the vision. And then number two, let's start double checking. Hey, is our language, is our interaction, are the emotions I'm bringing to the relationship, are the things we're choosing to do together, are those moving us toward this vision of relationship, or are they moving us somewhere else? And so the second thing is, create a vision of the future of your relationship and start interacting with
Mm.
that, and stop interacting with just constantly looking at the challenges in relationship, the things we don't like, and then getting sucked into the past.
What I love about creating a vision for the relationship is that if people have a challenge with accepting responsibility for how they feel, but if you create a attractive enough vision for the future, it's a motivation to go, okay, I'm going to let go of that because this
Correct.
is what I want to create. Can you talk a little about the work you do? Because I know you do weekends in the inner matrix. Do you also do that in the relationship? So what are the type, how can people work with you, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah. So our like, we have the fundamentals, right? And we set it up like a very low price point, like gym membership on purpose. Cause I see so many trainings out there where people are paying 5,000 or $10,000 for a weekend. And our training's world class. I have people all the time. They're like, "Joey, I don't understand why you're not charging 10 grand for this weekend." There's one reason. I want to make sure we give as many people access as possible. Like truly, at this point, I'm financially free. Like I don't have to do this, and I just want to make sure that world class training is available and accessible to as many people as possible that are willing to do the things that they want to do to change their life. So we have a very low membership price point. I think it's like 215 bucks a month, and they can come to our in person weekend trainings quarterly. Right, 2 full days of in person training quarterly, and then in
Wow.
addition, we do an hour of training once a week, live classes with our certified trainers. We have 54 certified trainers. Most of them have been doing the work 8, 14 years. So they're very, very skilled trainings. You pop on a Zoom or in person if there's one locally, and you do an hour training for the week, right? Where they say, "Hey, here's the training, here's the practice. You're going to do the 20 minutes with them, question and answer." So you get the training at least once a week. Then we have our proprietary app. So then you train on your own with the app. You open it once a day, you push play, you do the training, and then there's an action plan where you check in 3, 5, 10 times throughout the day and apply a skill and a tactic and a tool for the week. Then the next week you do session two, and then you're with your trainer, you review it, make sure you understand what to do, and then you practice it for a week. And so basically that's our cadence: one in-person intensive 2-day program, and then you have these weekly check-ins and trainings with the trainer to make sure you're actually training, developing the skills, feel comfortable knowing what you're doing. And then basically that'll take you through a year-long program. And again, it's just 215 bucks a month. And basically, because we have so many members, we're able to make something that would normally be 30, $50,000 for the year very, very inexpensive, but yet still offer the same kind of value you would get for those high price points. So those are the fundamentals. That's you developing you. And then from there, we have our mastery track series, which is like Relationship Alchemy, where, hey, I want to work relationship, I want to work with finance, I want to work with my body health, where we have tracks for enhancing, depending on what one's wanting to work on in their life at any given time.
I love that idea of the fundamentals because that having done this decades ago myself and witnessed the amount of people that go through these programs and don't change. And last year, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Tony Robbins, but last year I interviewed actually two people who had been trainers who worked with him, and one of them spoke about the high number of people who did the work and didn't change after it. And he was kind of
Yeah,
going, I mean, the guy is a master. If you spend a weekend with him and you don't change, like, I mean, what more is
yeah,
needed?
sure, sure, sure.
And my feeling is what's needed is the immersion. So I really love the idea that people can sign up to your program, do the the weekend every quarter, I think you said, and then have these in-person session once a week and doing something every day. Because if someone does that over a period of a year and their life doesn't radically change, then they're a hopeless case. So, where can people find you, Joey? Where will we point them to?
Yeah, the two best places is you can go straight to my company website, intermatrixsystems.com, or you can go straight to my website, joeyklein.com. If people want Relationship Alchemy, they can, get the book for the cost of shipping and get, some complimentary training there. That's just joeyklein.com, joeyklein.com. And then you can always grab me on the real Joey Klein on Instagram. So however people want to interact, that'd be awesome.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, there was a huge amount of value in that. So thank you for your time. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm well into the book at the moment. I've been in this space for going on 4 decades, and there's a huge amount of value in the book. So I would highly recommend it to anyone. I would highly recommend anyone to explore your program. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Joey, we will stick, by the way, in the show notes the links to all the websites and everything, so people can just dig in there and find you. Joey, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. This was super fun.
Thank you.